Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. I hope all of you are enjoying summer wherever you are. It's nice to have activities returning to normal, and we hope that trend continues when it comes to football season this fall. We have a first-time guest joining us on our Game Day segment this week, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine Magazine and podcasts will be with us in just a moment. July is usually a very quiet month as far as news goes on the Michigan athletic scene. This month, though, has been a little bit different. Football recruiting has been full steam, and we have picked up some big-time commitments in the last few weeks. With plenty of time left in the cycle, class of 2022 is ranked the 10th best in the country right now. Juwan Howard and basketball have not been quiet either. The team has been on campus for voluntary workouts for weeks now, and from what we hear, this year's team has a chance to be very, very good, and that is with a lot of new faces. We will find out in due time. For the next 5 months, football will hold our attention. This is a very big year for Jim Harbaugh and his team. And I know we say that every year, but after last year's disaster of a COVID-shortened season, bouncing back is a must. My guest today says an 8-4 season would be good, but he can see us getting as many as 9 W's. The schedule is not going to be easy for a young team looking to build confidence. Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine Magazine and podcast joins us next on this week's edition of The Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on this week's Game Day segment is Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine Magazine. If you listen to the Wolverine podcast, you also hear Clayton do a great job with that. First-time guest on the show, Clayton. I don't know what took us so long, but welcome aboard.
Yeah, what took so long? No,
I don't know.
It's great to be here, but been listening for a few years now. I know you've had a lot of my coworkers on, or all of them on, and it's a great podcast, so excited to be here.
Glad again to have you with us. And right now, here we are in, almost mid-July. Big Ten Media Days coming up. The first practice not that far away. The preseason magazines are out, and that includes the great Wolverine preview issue. And Clayton, you did a great section in that issue with an overview of this year's opponent. So if we could today, let's take some time to look over that schedule and get your thoughts as you did in that overview. Starting with the opener, it's going to be Western Michigan Labor Day weekend. What we do know about the Broncos is that they are supposed to be bringing in a lot of offensive firepower, big questions on the defense. It seems right now that offense will be a really good test for Mike Macdonald's new defense, won't it?
Definitely, and that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind is this is the first game, not only of the season and all of that, but the first game of the Mike Macdonald era on the Michigan defense. So he's going to have to, slow down a Western Michigan attack that I think can come in and put up, points in the 20s, depending on how things go. But, it'll be a good test, I think, going into that Washington game, knowing that they have to prepare for a serious offense. The numbers for Western Michigan last season were a little inflated since they only played MAC opponents. Usually they will play a game like a Michigan game or, something like that, but they only had 6 games against all MAC opponents. So I think the numbers are a little inflated, but they returned just about everybody on offense. And again, I think it is going to be a good test for Michigan's defense. And it's going to be, let's say Western Michigan does put up 24 points or something like that, then it'll be a good test for Michigan's offense against what is a not very good Western Michigan defense, but you still got to put up some points on the board and show that you made strides from last season.
No, absolutely. Well, after that Western opener, Washington comes in the next week, and that is a red-letter game for Michigan. The Huskies looking to improve themselves this season, and they have plenty of talent, don't they?
They do, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is a bit concerning again. Michigan's offense, nothing went really well for Michigan last season, but on the offensive side of things, it was, a disappointing step back, I thought, even considering the guys they lost. So they have to show that the experience that some of those young guys got last season actually paid off, and they can, perform against a team like Washington. I think if Michigan's defense, is improved from last season, this could be a low-scoring type of game. And I think the crowd is going to play a huge factor in this one. It's basically a toss-up when you look at some of these early Vegas lines. I think Michigan's favored by 2.5, which on a neutral field would be just about a pick-em game there. And obviously that could change before before September 11th. But so I think this is interesting when you look at this is kind of the swing game when you look at people's preseason predictions. I have Michigan at 8-4, and I actually have them winning this game early on. Obviously, again, that can change. My prediction is subject to change, but a lot of people have them losing this game and going maybe 6-6 or 7-5. This is one of those games that is going to set the tone for the season. You play Northern Illinois next week, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you can win this game, you can get a little bit of momentum going here, heading into what's going to be a tough Big Ten slate that I obviously we'll talk about as well. So this is a huge game. I think we're going to see a packed Big House under the lights. I'm excited for that. 8 p.m. start. Michigan 9-2 now in night games at the Big House, so certainly an edge there.
Yeah, and as you said, you hate to put too much on a Week 2 game. I'm not expecting a W in that game. I don't know why. I just have bad vibes about it. Because it is Washington and a very good opponent, the psychological factor or impact from winning a game like that, really, it could be a turning point for this team, even though it's Week 2. Right.
And I think one of the things, too, that Michigan has to prove is that, let's say they do drop this game as you expect them to and as many people expect them to. You're not alone there. This is going to be a tough one to win. You cannot let the season fall off the tracks.
No.
You can't get the train off the tracks after this game. The same thing goes for a game against Wisconsin and, a few weeks later that we'll talk about obviously here coming up. But this Michigan team too many times, whether that's within a game, or within a season or within a grouping of games where things don't go their way and they kind of wilt a little bit over the last couple seasons. And they've been able to regroup at times. You look at 2019, they put together a solid season, but you're down 28-0 at half a couple times in a row to Wisconsin. You got to be able to respond. So if you lose this game, come back, regroup against Northern Illinois, regroup against Rutgers, and, go into that Wisconsin game with a little bit more momentum and, look to win another big game. This is a big season for Michigan, so losing one game early on in the season cannot derail this team if they want to, frankly, kind of keep things together.
Well, Week 3, whatever happens in that Washington game, Northern Illinois, from the MAC pays a visit to the Big House in Clayton. They were one of the worst teams in college football last season, for what that's worth in that COVID year. And they aren't expected to be much better this year, are they?
No, they're not. The number one storyline when you look at Northern Illinois is that Rocky Lombardi, former Michigan State quarterback who started and beat Michigan last year in the Big House, will be returning to Michigan Stadium. He played the game of his life last season. I don't think he has enough talent around him to pull out a win in this one. I think this is a game that Michigan should win by 25 points, 27 points. It's actually 27.5 was the early game line here. Northern Illinois, one of the worst teams in the FBS, as you mentioned. And, this is a game that win or lose that Washington game, that's going to be an emotional game at night, be a quicker turnaround than the normal game. But, again, you're at home, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But that's an emotional game. This is a little bit of a rebound. You cannot let this become a trap game. But, frankly, no offense to Northern Illinois, I just don't think they have enough talent to even have it be in the conversation of being a trap game. So it should be an easy win for Michigan.
Well, after that one, next up is the Big Ten opener with Rutgers. Greg Schiano back as head coach. He's recruiting very well, as we all know. So they're moving, they think, in the right direction. But this year, they are not expected to be that good at all, are they?
No, it's a little bit of a scary game. So, when talking about this game on our podcast and things like that and going over the schedule and writing all these previews for the Wolverine Magazine, I've looked at this game and said, man, this is a team that took Michigan to triple overtime last year. Granted, that was in Piscataway, but there were no fans, so it wasn't like it was some raucous road environment or anything like that. But Michigan should be improved. Now, there is one guarantee I have about this season. Michigan will be improved from last year. It's not saying a whole lot, but at the same time, I think this is going to be a better Michigan team. This might be a slightly better Rutgers team but Michigan has too much talent for this to be a game. They're 17-point favorites in this one, this summer when the lines opened up. I think that's about right. This is a game Michigan should kind of handle start to finish. Won't necessarily be a 52-0 blowout like it was a couple of years ago because, as you mentioned, Greg Schiano has done a great job. I don't like the guy personally, but you got to give him credit for what he's done, injecting some life into that Scarlet Knight program. They were lifeless. I mean, they hadn't won a Big Ten game since 2017. They beat Michigan State in the opener last season, and even though they weren't very good, even though they had a ton of problems on offense especially, they showed life in every game. They fought in every game. And, what would they lose to Ohio State by, I think, in the 20s? They didn't get totally shellacked by Ohio State. They were able to hang in there. So this is a Rutgers team that returns a whole heck of a lot. They can be dangerous. So if Michigan is a disaster again this season, God forbid, this is a game that's in play to lose, but I just don't think it's going to come to that.
Oh, God. Let's hope not anyway. I can't see that either. So
I don't need to be too negative, but yeah.
It seems to me Rutgers is just geographically where they're located. They're a sleeping giant. The fact that they are in a recruiting area that is just loaded with talent. Do you have a vibe that Greg Schiano is going to be able to make them competitive in the Big Ten East?
Competitive is maybe a relative term. I thought this about Rutgers, that, even when they came into the Big Ten, they were, I don't think they were in the basement there. Didn't they finish maybe fourth a couple times?
Yeah.
And then they really fell off. So I think they can get there. I think they could get up, up to third. Maybe their ceiling is what Indiana was maybe before last season. I'm not sure they quite have the ceiling of an Indiana from last season, where they were actually, one of the better teams in the Big Ten, and I thought should have gotten to the Big Ten championship game before those rules got changed. So I think maybe that's the ceiling. They could get up to fourth, third in the Big Ten, but you really never know. I mean, who knows if they, let's say he is as good as Tom Allen as a coach, and like you said, that is a recruiting hotbed. I know Ohio State plucks a lot of guys out of the New Jersey area. If they're able to do that and keep guys home and fence in the Garden State, as Chris Ash tried to do a few years ago, then I guess you never really know. But, I think right now they're just trying to win a few games here in the Big Ten.
Well, Week 5 is another one that I have circled on my calendar for a lot of reasons. There is a chance we could be 4-0 heading up to Madison for that game. And after that trip, we should have a much better idea of where we are as a team, shouldn't we, Clayton?
Definitely. And this is kind of a redemption game. Everybody knows the struggles against Wisconsin the last couple of years. They're very concerning. I was talking to Adam Rittenberg of ESPN, the national analyst, a few weeks ago, and I was just asking him about the gap between Michigan and Ohio State, and then he ended up bringing up the fact that, everybody right now there's a gap between Ohio State and everybody in the Big Ten, Michigan included, but it's concerning that Michigan has now a gap against Wisconsin, a team that, doesn't recruit particularly well. I think last year was their first top 25 class in a decade. So it's not like they're getting 5-star talent all over the place, but they have an identity. They're tough. They're physical. In a lot of ways, they're what Michigan kind of used to be with smash mouth football, at least on the identity side of things. And Michigan has gotten beaten up the last couple of years to the tune of over 300 rushing yards in both of those games. So this is something, at the very least, you got to keep it competitive in Madison. I hate to say that because there are no moral victories, but this is going to be a good Wisconsin team. I think they don't have a great offense. They were very, very good on defense last year, but struggled on the offensive side of the ball. Again, a weird year for them because they missed a couple games and then had to, kind of re-jumpstart their season. Graham Mertz, was out with the virus, so he obviously had some things to work through. But this is a Wisconsin team that has potential. At the same time, all these teams, Wisconsin included, have all their own question marks as well. So you can't just go in and say going into the season that this is an automatic loss for Michigan. They're going to have a chance, but again, Michigan hasn't won in Madison since I think 2001.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tough task this season if they want to pull it off.
Absolutely, and it's as we well know, it's a madhouse to play in. And when you think of that Wisconsin program, though, you just mentioned their first top 25 recruiting class in over a decade. The one thing that makes you understand is how well they develop their talent, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I love, I think Paul Christ was underrated for, quite a few years there when he got in, and he started doing well and maybe even better at times than, what you saw under Brett Bielema, a couple coaches ago. But I love Jim Leonard on the defensive side of the ball. He's a former Badger. He knows exactly what Badger defense is supposed to look like. He does a great job. He actually turned down the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator job this offseason. So he wants to be there. He's all in. He knows what works. He's coveted by, NFL teams like the Packers. So you just can't say enough good things about Wisconsin right now. They know exactly who they are, for better or for worse. There's probably some Wisconsin fans out there that say, hey, we're never going to get into a 4-team playoff. They're definitely going to get into some of these 12-team playoffs down the road. But they were probably saying, we're never going to get into this 4-team playoff. We're never going to win a national championship. And, that will probably frustrate some fans. But at the same time, going to some of these Rose Bowls and going to the Big Ten championship game, I know they're in the West, and it's a little bit easier than, say, a Michigan trying to, catch up to an Ohio State in the East. But it ain't that bad, what Wisconsin's got going on right now.
Well, Week 6, Nebraska comes to town. We haven't played them since 2018. And from what I'm reading, the clock is ticking for Scott Frost at his alma mater, isn't it?
Yeah, and this game's actually in Lincoln.
That's right.
So that's going to make this one tough. I think it's one of the games, you try to go through the schedule, and again, so much changes week to week once you actually get to the season. But, we're in the business here, so we're looking at the schedule year-round. And, you kind of have a feel for each game. We talked about, the first few, that Washington game, I think is going to be pretty tight. They have a great defense. Wisconsin, kind of the same thing that, that's going to be a really good team. It's going to be a tough task. We'll talk about some more. You have a grasp on some of these teams, but this Nebraska one is tough to get a feel on because, like you said, the clock is ticking for Scott Frost, as I wrote in the headline, for this article. And they do have an experienced quarterback. They have a lot coming back. I was actually, in doing some of my research for these pieces, I like to go over to some of the local sites of these teams and just kind of, even look at their message boards and what they're talking about and, really get a pulse of kind of what the fan base is thinking. There's always a guy in there that, when you do your research and you look at stats that, didn't put up big stats the year before, but all these guys, are all these fans and media people are expecting to do big things, kind of like you see, for Michigan as well. So I like to kind of get in there and see what they're talking about. And they're decently optimistic about the fact that this team has a lot returning. Now, people would counter that and say, well, Nebraska fans are delusional because they always think that, it's the 90s and everything's kind of what it was under Tom Osborne. So we'll see on Nebraska. Regardless, it's going to be tough to go in there. Like you said, it's been a while since Michigan's played at Nebraska. They played, Nebraska a few years ago at home when Scott Frost was just getting there. But hey, if Michigan can't beat Nebraska on the road, at least hopefully they can out-hit them.
Yeah.
That would be a nice moral victory too.
Well, after that, it's Pat Fitzgerald and his Northwestern Wildcats. And when last we saw them, they were in the Big Ten championship game, and they were giving Ohio State all that they wanted and more. But this is not the same team this year, is it, Clayton?
No, and that's exactly what I was going to say. So we also, in this, Michigan Football Preview magazine, ranked the, Michigan schedule, every opponent on it from the most difficult to the least difficult. And Northwestern actually checks in as the 5th easiest game on Michigan's schedule, according to me, who did these rankings. And, it may surprise some people. This is a Northwestern team that was fun to watch last season. They didn't play the flashy brand of football, but man, are they tough. Man, are they disciplined. They're really, really well coached. Everyone knows that Pat Fitzgerald is a very good coach. And, Hankowitz on the defensive side of things, who retired, obviously a Michigan man there, was running the show for the defense. But as you said, this is not the same Northwestern team. They lose Patty Fisher in the middle, who was an All-American linebacker. They lose Blake Gallagher, their other linebacker, who started and was the second leading tackler on the team. They also lose Peyton Ramsey at the quarterback spot, who I think did a ton for that offense. They have, a few other talented players coming back, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to be, pretty decent there as always. But let's take a look back at Northwestern and what they've done the last couple of years. In 2018, they won the Big Ten West. In 2019, they go 3-9, and then in 2020, they win the Big Ten West. So it's not inconceivable. In fact, it's very, very, very conceivable to believe that Northwestern is capable of kind of being an every other year type of team, taking a big step back. I expect them to do that. And, that's why I was talking to Phil Steele last week as well, and he was saying that Michigan has a very tough schedule. He has them as number 12 toughest in the country, but he also believes it's a little bit of an overrated type of schedule when you look at some of the numbers from teams last season, because teams like Northwestern are going to take a step back. So that's what I expect. I think Michigan should win this game if all goes according to plan. Maybe they have one loss, maybe two going into this game. But if it's a season that has kind of snowballed in the wrong direction, then certainly Northwestern is capable of coming in and winning.
Well, hopefully we pull off a W in that one because Week 8, it's a bus ride to East Lansing to meet the Spartans. And we all remember what happened last year. And, yeah, it's a rivalry game. It's going to be physical, always is. But it is hard to imagine for me anyway, Michigan getting beat by this Spartan team again 2 years in a row, Clayton.
Yeah, last season they were coming off a loss to Rutgers, as we mentioned when talking about the Scarlet Knights. They come into the Big House. Michigan was rolling coming off of that Minnesota game, and everyone thought that this was going to be a good Michigan team. There was I believe it was Joel Klatt, from Fox Sports, saying that this could be Michigan's best team under Jim Harbaugh. He loved Joe Milton, loved what the defense did flying around on that Saturday night, kind of a magical Saturday night. And then reality hit on Halloween in the Big House, and, to say the least. But this was a Michigan State team that finished last in the Big Ten East last season. Michigan, if they would have played Ohio State and, a couple more of those games, may have beaten them out for that last spot. But facts say that Michigan State was last in the Big Ten. This was not a good Michigan State team. This will not be a good Michigan State team this season. I think their over-under win total on the year is 4.5. So this is a team not expected to make a bowl game. If you lose this game, if you're Michigan, Jim Harbaugh will have a losing record against the Spartans. You don't want that, certainly, to say the least again. But, yeah, I think this Michigan State team, they're in kind of a similar boat to Rutgers. They're probably starting from a little bit higher of a point, and I guess that's maybe even a little bit more why it's a little bit more impressive what Greg Schiano's doing. But, they're bringing in a lot of transfers. They're trying to kind of jumpstart a program that was, let's be honest, picking up the pieces a little bit after Mark D'Antonio unceremoniously resigned. So Mel Tucker's trying to do some similar things there, bringing in a lot of transfers. There's not a ton of talent. This is a game that Michigan has to win. I think it's about the number one and most important game on this schedule in terms of you must win it. Ohio State, you'd much rather win that one, but this is the game that I think you have to win for Jim Harbaugh, for this Michigan staff, to prove to the fan base, to the media, to everybody, to themselves, that this thing is starting to go back in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. And you've got to get it for the reason, too, that the next week is a very scary game. Coach Allen and his Hoosiers. Now, they've lost assistant coaches in the offseason, some starters, but overall, this team has a lot of talent, and they will be a very difficult team for Michigan to beat this year, won't they?
Yeah, Indiana's kind of flipped the script a little bit. They were kind of always that team searching for the marquee win. And for a few years there under Tom Allen, even going back to the Kevin Wilson era, it felt like they just couldn't win that big game. Remember, they took Michigan to overtime, double overtime a couple times, and weren't able to pull those out. Finally, they win for the first time since, 1987, I believe. They beat Michigan, and like you said, they were beating just about everybody last season. They hung in tough against Ohio State. As I mentioned earlier, I thought they should have made the Big Ten championship game, but Michael Penix coming off of an injury late in the season last year. We'll see how good he is again. I expect him to be, back up to, what his former self was. This is a team that has a ton of talent in the defensive backfield. Tom Allen, I think, is, you can talk all you want about him being a great motivator and, what he's done to kind of bring some energy into that program and create an identity there. He's a defensive mastermind, in my opinion. The way he disguises his defense, he made it tough on Joe Milton and a ton of other quarterbacks, including Justin Fields last season, who threw a few picks against them. So this is a well-coached Indiana team. a good Indiana team, and it's going to be darn tough for Michigan to pull this one off. At home, like you said, this is kind of one of those ones you pencil in as a loss, to be quite honest, and that really shouldn't be the case against Indiana. But I guess the bulk of that has to be credit towards them, because they've done a great job to kind of get over the hump a little bit with their program, and now they're the hunted. They're not the hunter anymore; they're the hunted. So it'll be interesting to see how their season plays out themselves.
Yeah, going to be a very tough game, and you really want the W against IU, because you turn around the next week and you head to Happy Valley for what I'm guessing. I don't think they've made it official yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be a whiteout game and a night game. Again, I don't think that's official yet. But either way, getting a W in that madhouse is never easy, as we have seen so many times. As of right now, I find it hard to believe we're going to do that this year, Clayton.
Yeah, it's another one of those ones that you can kind of pencil in when you're going through the schedule as a loss, but I wouldn't necessarily write this one off yet. I mean, Penn State, sometimes we can follow a team, and I'm guilty of this all the time, covering Michigan and day to day, we're writing articles, we're interacting with fans, and we're really looking at everything through a Michigan lens. But if you take a step back and look at it through a Penn State lens, they have a lot of question marks as well. I know they turned their season around last year. They won their last 4 games after starting off 0-5. So they have momentum on their side. They kind of worked out some of the problems they had. They also suffered some key injuries. They had, I believe, Micah Parsons opted out of that season as well, was set to be an All-American once again at the linebacker spot. So they were in a similar boat to Michigan, but they're in a similar boat to Michigan again, where they have some questions to be answered. Sean Clifford isn't a great quarterback for Penn State. He's solid. He can run a little bit, and shown he can do that, but this isn't necessarily an explosive team. So I think Michigan's going to have a shot. I expect them to lose this game, but I think Michigan is going to have a chance in this one. And yeah, the whiteout hasn't been too kind for the Wolverines in years past. If you're a Michigan fan, I think you're kind of hoping this is maybe a 3:30 start, and you hope for some good luck from the TV gods here.
Hopefully we can find a way anyway to scratch out a win there, because the next week it's Maryland. Mike Loxley has, as we know, upgraded the talent of the Terrapins, but this is still a team Michigan should be able to handle, even on the road.
Yeah, I agree. And this is another one of those games that, if Michigan's season is going okay, as good as maybe we think it can, where they're losing those games you think they're going to lose, but they're winning the winnable games again, like we've seen them do not all too often, very, very often. It's a good thing against, under Jim Harbaugh. It's a natural trap game heading into Ohio State, but you can't look ahead of this Maryland team, which is kind of seeking some more consistency this year. And, I like Talia Tagovailoa, the brother of Tua, who transferred from Alabama. He's got a great arm. He's a gunslinger. He's gutsy, but he's inconsistent. In losses to Northwestern and Indiana last year, he threw a combined 6 interceptions and only completed 50.8% of his passes. But in wins over Minnesota and Penn State, he completed 72.1% of his throws for 670 yards, 6 touchdowns. So he's shown he can be really, really good at times. He's also shown that he can just, have some duds of games. So, and I think that kind of goes for the whole team there. But Mike Loxley is recruiting a little bit better as well. You see some of these teams, finally Rutgers and Maryland are benefiting from being a part of the Big Ten on the recruiting trail. For so long it was like, they should be recruiting a little bit better, but they just weren't. I think you're seeing that now under Greg Schiano and Mike Loxley respectively. So Maryland's another game that's a little bit scary, just because of where it's positioned in the schedule and the fact that they do have some talent, and they do have especially, a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, but a winnable game. I think Michigan by double digits if I were to give an early prediction.
Well, and it could be a trap game. It just depends, where we are at that point in the season, and we're going to want to get it.
Definitely.
Because Thanksgiving weekend means it's time for the game. Ohio State is simply reloading, and I have not read or heard anyone that thinks Michigan has a chance in that game. That said, the table has to turn at some point, and Ohio State is not going to have a drop-off anytime soon from a talent perspective. As of this moment, it's very hard to imagine Michigan ending the skid this year, isn't it, Clayton?
It is very hard to imagine that. Sadly, from a Michigan standpoint, At the same time, this is going to be finally, I think, the year that we find out a little bit more about how good of a coach Ryan Day is. I've been skeptical of exactly how good of a job he's doing. I know he's a very, very good offensive mind. He's a good offensive coordinator. He's done a good job. I'm not taking anything away from what he's done as a head coach, but they're finally losing significant talent once again on the defensive side of the ball. And frankly, people kind of forget this, but they were not very good on defense last season, especially in the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the bottom half of the Big Ten in passing defense, in yards per game allowed. So, that's something to watch. They lose guys in the secondary there. They happen to have 4- and 5-star guys to replace them, but at the same time, these are some unproven guys. And then you can't just say about this Ohio State team that C.J. Stroud, who looks to be the favorite to win that quarterback job, is going to be as good as Justin Fields or is going to be really good right away as a redshirt freshman. Everyone's kind of expecting that. I've seen a couple rankings of the Big Ten quarterbacks, and he's coming in second or third. I've seen him second a couple times right behind Michael Penix. This guy hasn't taken, maybe he took some snaps last year. I'm not exactly sure, but he hasn't taken many snaps or any meaningful snaps. So I'm not totally convinced that Ohio State is going to win the Big Ten. I think they'll win the Big Ten East, but I'm not going to say right away that they're a lock to win the Big Ten like I thought they have been in years past. At the same time, when you're looking at Michigan right now, there's way too many question marks to say that this team is going to, even keep it fairly close in single digits. I think it will be another Ohio State win in the Big House, even that it kind of pains me to say.
Well, the Wolverine staff weighed in with your thoughts on wins and losses for this year in that great preview magazine. On average, I think it's safe to say most of you guys, I know you mentioned 8-4 at the top of the show, but I think overall as an average, it was about 7-5 is where everyone thought this team would end up, which is not what the Michigan faithful want to hear, we know, but it is a realistic appraisal of where this team is, at least right now, entering the season, isn't it, Clayton?
Yeah, it's kind of cautious, and you could even say cautiously optimistic because I think our Doug Skeen in there, former All Big Ten offensive lineman, won 5 Big Ten championships. He's an analyst for us. Said 5-7, or it might have been. He's been saying 5-7. He might not have been included in the preview, but I believe Doug Karsh was 5-7, if I'm not mistaken. So there's some people out there with those predictions, and man, is it kind of razor thin? I think there's going to be a few of those games that's going to really decide it. I think there are a few locks, or close to being a lock to win. That'd be Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, Rutgers. You would assume Maryland. Michigan State, you can't really put that in necessarily that category. I think it'd be the next category up, but yeah. That's 4 or 5 wins that you're gonna get probably. But beyond that, there's really no guarantees on that schedule. Sure, there are some teams you should beat, like a Northwestern, like we mentioned, but this is a tough one. And if some of those teams end up being a little bit better than we think, it could be a rough season. So I'm at 8-4. I'm a little bit more optimistic than the others. I know John Borton's also at 8-4, so shout out to JB, for making that prediction. I'm right there. I think that they're going to lose the games that they should lose. I think they're going to impress in some of those other games, and it's going to come up. I was talking to Phil Steele about this, who has Michigan at 7-5, and I said, how close are they, though, to being a 9-win team or a 10-win team like we've seen them be a few times under Jim Harbaugh? And he said it's going to be close. He thinks it's, Washington is nearly a toss-up since it's at home. He thinks that, Indiana can be a game that Michigan wins, Penn State. So if they are a little bit better than people think, they're going to be right in some of those games, and that's really going to decide how this record exactly plays out. But at the very least, right? I mean, Mike, what do you think? They got to make a bowl game here to prove that they're taking some positive steps forward off of that disastrous season.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I can't imagine that they won't. That would be
right.
Well, for Jim Harbaugh, that would be not good. When I look at this team after following Michigan football for so many years, I look at the talent level and how we've recruited in the Big Ten and against and nationally. There's so much talent on this team, and I know when you read the analysts from around the country, they say there are so many question marks, and I agree. So to me, I think 7-5 is a fair prognostication of where this team will end up. But because there is so much young talent. I think really in the end what it's going to boil down to is who steps up. How many of these young players surprise us and start living
Right.
up to their potential maybe early? So I sort of agree with Phil Steele. It's razor thin, but I could see this team winning 9 games.
I'm with you. I don't think I've heard some people say that the ceiling's 8 wins or something like that. I think they're kind of forgetting that, and maybe part of it is the fact that, last season, everything was so crazy with playing conference only schedules and things like that. But, if you're good enough to win 8 games, you're probably good enough or very, very close to being good enough to win 9, to win 10, because, in college football, it's not always where if you're better, you're only about 2 games better than the year before. And then the next game or the next year, you win 2 more. You can make significant jumps in college football. Teams are very different year to year. You see so much roster turnover. That's what makes it kind of so fun, because you can get a team that surprises. And your point I thought was outstanding, that, man, it's time for some of these guys that were high recruits or, pretty good recruits, or that Michigan loved in the recruiting process, that are now in their second year, maybe their third year, to step up and, surprise some people and burst onto the scene. I think it's been, a couple of years since we've really seen that. We didn't see it last season. I know it was a shortened year, or maybe if they would have had spring ball and some more time in the fall, where you would have seen some of that development happen a little bit quicker. But this is a big season for some guys that can also look at the roster like us and say, hey, there's not a ton of talent in front of me here. Let me make a move and become the guy that, everyone thought I was going to be coming out of high school. So there's opportunity there, and I think that's why you can't write off a 9-10 win season either.
I agree with that. It's well past time for a lot of these kids to step up. And I know last year,
Right.
what still lingers in my mind is listening to, Fox analysts and ESPN sportscasters talk about the culture at Michigan and the bad attitude that was to them so obvious from so many players during games, something I thought I would never see at Michigan. From the get-go, that is something I hope is corrected.
Yes, that is, thing number one that you need to correct. You never thought you would see it at Michigan, especially, if you're fortunate enough to have seen a lot of those earlier and really all the Lloyd Card years and, the Gary Mueller years and the Bo Schembechler years. It's something you never thought you'd see. It's something you never thought you would see under Jim Harbaugh, a disciple, of Bo Schembechler, and a guy who knows exactly what this program is all about. So it is baffling. It was disappointing. It was a little bit saddening last season to see that. You saw the body language on the sideline. I thought it was a little overblown last year, but I still think it was a thing. There was not much life on that sideline. There wasn't much fight in that team. When they got down 28-0 at halftime and they're in the rain against Wisconsin at home, I mean, it was kind of eerie, when you see some of those shots on TV of the, panning out, and it's an empty stadium and there's a lifeless Michigan team on the sideline. So that needs to be corrected. And I think they've taken some great steps, Mike, to kind of shore that out this offseason. Doesn't it make you feel or sleep a little bit better at night knowing that Mike Hart is in that building and Ron Bellamy is in that building, and even Courtney Morgan, a guy who knows what this program's about, is now the director of player personnel in that building. The Steve Klinkscale, a guy that, we've heard so many great things about when it comes to X's and O's, when it comes to technique, when it comes to recruiting, but also when it comes to culture and caring about the kids and connecting with these kids. Mike McDonald, we've heard nothing but great things. Somebody in the building told us he's the man, and he's connecting well. These kids love him. Matt Weiss, the same thing. We've heard from, some people that are close to the program about the way he's connecting with the quarterbacks. He's completely won that group of guys over. So Jim Harbaugh, when he sat back and everyone thought he was just taking a vacation out in San Diego over Christmas, I can tell you that guy, he is always thinking about his team. He's always thinking about football, and he made some moves that I thought were great. But at the same time, football is not played on paper. The wins have to come. The culture has to come. And the number one thing, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is when things aren't going your way, when you are down 14 or you're losing by double digits on the road and some guys want to pack it in, you just can't do it. You can't allow, them to do that, because there's more season left to play. There's more game left to play. My philosophy when I think Michigan was down 21-0 to Wisconsin on the road in 2019.
Yeah.
And they kind of gave up at that point, but you didn't necessarily know it would get that bad. And I was saying, well, I mean, they just scored 21 unanswered points. Michigan, a team that was, ranked and expected to do big things, was the preseason Big Ten favorite, can rattle off 21 of their own. That unfortunately wasn't the mindset of that team. And it just has to be, especially at a place like Michigan, when the talent is there, you have all the resources that you need. You can't allow these kids to, not be motivated no matter what. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, I give Rutgers so much credit for the fight they showed all season long. So that is the number one thing I think that Michigan has to do this year, is fix the culture and fix the resolve of this team. And I think that they've taken some good steps forward towards that.
Well, I hope so too, because it's unacceptable, I think, to play college football and have attitude or culture problems when you're getting the opportunity that you're getting. I don't care where you're playing in college football. So,
right.
And I think when I look at these new coaching additions, besides being great recruiters, young coaches, proven coaches, to me they're attitude guys. And it reminds me of something Jim Harbaugh's old coach, Bo Schembechler, said, that one thing he learned as a coach is you better coach attitude every day of the week with every one of your players, because if you don't, then you're going to have problems, and you can't let that spin out of control.
Definitely. That's why, like we said, it's just surprising that happened. But at the same time, I mentioned it with the wins and losses. College football is different year to year. This roster is different. The complexion is different. Aiden Hutchinson is now in his senior season, and we've heard great things about the leadership he's taking. These guys are bought in. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And there's something about a group of guys that, you saw it in 2015 in Jim Harbaugh's first season, that, they were just sick of losing, and they went off, and rattled off 10 wins. Even Brady Hoke's first season, that group was just like, man, we're too good to be, put in these spots and losing these games. And they rattled off 11 wins. So I think that the culture is going to be better than it was last season. And like you said, some of the attitude type of stuff has to get cleaned up. We've heard great things about what exactly went on during spring ball in terms of that, where, some of those coaches that Jim replaced weren't as personable with the kids. I thought a lot of them were very good teachers of the game, but if you're not getting through to a kid, and if the kid has tuned you out, it doesn't matter how much you know about technique or X's and O's. So, if you can get through to these kids, which, we've heard there's some more open door policies in that building now, and that the kids actually really like their position coaches. A couple guys that were kind of on the fence of transferring decided to stay because of some of these new coaches. So that, in a time where things are pretty quiet in the Michigan football world, the college football world, as you kind of mentioned earlier, that we're waiting for training camp to start. The little bits and pieces we're getting, I think, are positive on the culture front.
Well, a final question before we let you get away here, Clayton. You and I know that for the fans, and even many in administration in Michigan, the clock is in some way ticking for Jim Harbaugh. What do you think, as we sit here in mid-July, would be the minimum he needs to do this year to keep his job for another couple of seasons?
I think that's a loaded question. It's a great question, because it's kind of the one that I think that the most people are asking coming into this year, because last season, Jim Harbaugh got his contract extension. We all know that he took a pay cut. We all know that his contract is now laden with incentives to win championships, to win, a certain amount of games, to get to a playoff, all those types of things. Now, Ward Manuel also said, when we got him on a Zoom call, with a bunch of reporters a few months ago, somebody asked, what is the, minimum? He said, I don't put a minimum on things. I want to compete for championships. No one wants to compete for championships more than me, more than Jim Harbaugh, more than the coaching staff, more than the players in that building. And he said that this isn't kind of a one-year type of thing. Now, I think it can be if things are disastrous. If they miss a bowl game, if they lose to Michigan State, if they lose one of those Rutgers-Maryland games, and they just kind of show that, all right, this isn't working, then I think it very well may be over. But I think if they can win 7 games, can win 8 games, maybe even 6, depends on who you lose to. If you beat Michigan State, and you show that, 1, the culture's fixed, as we've talked about at length here. 2, their player development. Guys are getting better. They're playing, good football at times. Maybe they're a little inconsistent. It's a young team, so they're losing a couple games. But showing that you are improving throughout the season, I think, is going to be big as well. There's an aspect to this that I think is the eye test, about this team. It's not going to come down necessarily to the record at the end of the year. You're not going to discount that by any means, but it's going to come down to the look of this team. If it looks anything close to what it was last year, that's a big, big problem, I think, for Jim Harbaugh in his future. But, Jim Harbaugh's got his back against the wall. He's uncomfortable in a lot of ways. I feel like a guy like him and a competitor like him likes that to an extent. He said he's betting on himself. Hey, that's why they play the games. I think this Michigan team is going to be a little bit better than some people expect.
I think so too, and I hope so. And I know Jim hopes so too, because I can't see him accepting.
Nobody hopes so more than him.
Oh,
Nobody
man.
hopes
Yeah.
that they're better more than he did.
It is at the very minimum going to be an interesting season, because a lot is riding in this for Jim Harbaugh, his staff, and a lot of people. So we shall see. Here with us on today's Game Day edition has been first-time guest Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine Magazine, who also is on the Wolverine podcast that you hear, that I listen to weekly, and does such a great job. Clayton, we want to thank you for coming on the show for the first time, and once we get the season kicked off, we look forward to having you back.
That'd be great. I'd be down to come on anytime. I appreciate it. Love the podcast and had a lot of fun.
On Quick Hits today, thanks again to Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine Magazine for being our guest. He'll be with us again once the season gets underway. Big Ten Media Days is next week, and the start of fall practice will follow in 2 weeks. It's hard to believe another season is almost here. College football fans love this time of year, though. We're all undefeated, and hope springs eternal. This will be the year we challenge in the Big Ten. We hope, anyway. So let's enjoy the build-up and what's left of summer. To that end, I'll be on vacation for the next 2 weeks. We will return to regular programming the first week of August when I get back, and spend the month previewing the season. When the action starts in September, we'll be back to our 2 weekly shows, as we have for many years now. A visitor's edition with the opponent's radio play-by-play voice or beat writer, and our Michigan Game Day edition with one of our own writers or radio reporters. So once again, enjoy the next few weeks and get ready for an August of previews and hype as we eagerly wait to get another Michigan football season underway. Have a great Wolverine couple of weeks, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!